Okay, Macbeth, one of my absolute favorites. Did you notice while you read that most of the scenes take place at night or in the shadows? There's lots of talk of darkness and things like that. It's a very dark play in many ways, but as Bradley points out, it's a play of color too. And if that's true, then certainly the colors are the red of blood and the slow coming light of dawn. It's a play about the eclipse of civility, of the temporary triumph of evil, and the madness of ambition, which ambition in Shakespeare's day was kind of a bad word, doesn't have the same, meaning today. Of course, today to be ambitious is a good thing. In Shakespeare's day, it was kind of seen as the idea of trying to rise up above your station, perhaps, or a Machiavellian, the end justifies the mean kind of feeling or outlook. Anyway, many scholars have pointed out that no matter when Macbeth is staged or set, it's always a relevant work. It's always relatable, no matter whenever it's being performed. So yeah, let's dig in. It was written in and performed in 1606 or 1607, somewhere around that time, in Shakespeare's principal source, historical source, which was Raphael Holinshed's Chronicles of England, Scotland, and Ireland, which was written in 1587. Banquo actually aids in the murder of the king. Oh, and I'm realizing that you can't see all of my notes here. Let's just whoop. Written to suit King James' taste. We'll get to that in a second. All right. Keep going. So Banquo aids in the murder of the king, and Shakespeare suppresses this completely in his telling. Why was that? Well, because Banquo is the ancestor of King James, and so I think you'll see in the play that Banquo and his line of succession are set up for success in the play, and that kind of leads us into why this play was written and who, in particular, it was written for. King James, the new king, crowned in 1603, his parents had both been killed, and he had a horrible fascination with assassination and a powerful conviction that a king was a sacred figure. He'd even written a book on witchcraft and suspected the hand of the devil in any plot against any king. He actually even suspected that witches had at various points in his life had conspired against him. He feared the existence of the occult. He believed in the occult, the invisible forces that are bent on bringing all things to ruin. So yeah, this play was definitely right up his alley, and certainly the very grateful Lord Chamberlain's men, who became the King's men, as we talked about, upon the Queen's death and James being so into the theater, it's easy to imagine that they were eager to please their new benefactor. So yeah, here are a couple additional notes on this screen here for you. Things that James loved. It was a short play. It had witches in it. There was a need for worthy ancestors, for James's own right to the throne, divine right, as well as that obsession with the occult. A little bit about the play itself. Superstition still persists today. It is a very dark play, and performed on stage it is too. And so actors, who are a suspicious bunch anyway, attribute a lot of accidents, even deaths and bad injuries that tend to happen during this play. And so they won't refer to it, especially within a theater, as by its name. They'll refer to it as the Scottish play. It's even worse to quote the play itself. Although if Sir Patrick Stewart is to be believed, you then say a line from Midsummer Night's Dream, because the magic of the fairies is supposed to negate the evil magic of Macbeth. Anyway, I'm going to slide my little video right back down, and we're going to keep going. Okay, questions to consider for this week. You've already seen them, but we're just going to touch on them again to think about even during the lecture as we talk. Do you think of Macbeth as evil or weak? Or something else? Is it possible to control your fate? I think that's a question that the play definitely poses. And then what does it mean to be loyal to your king? Oh man, I'm not doing a good job with these graphics. Look, there's this pretty castle over here in my PowerPoint. I'm just going to move myself around as we go. Okay. So things to watch for in this play. Repetitive things and stuff like that. Blood, we talked about. Sleep, or the lack of sleep. People not being able to sleep. Clothes that don't fit, and the symbolism of that. Delayed conversations, and animals acting strangely. To show that even the natural world is out of order. All right, our literary terms for the week. We've got chiasmus. Chiasmus. I'm on loop. Okay. When words or concepts are repeated in reverse order, in the same or a modified form, you see it almost right away. Fair is foul and foul is fair. That sort of thing. And then equivocation. So one of the ways that the devil was seen to tempt humans is through equivocation. The twisting of the truth and peppering it with lies to tempt them with their deepest desires. So the Weird Sisters never tell Macbeth anything straight, and nothing they say is fully correct or fully wrong, but it's always based on interpretation. Equivocation was also a Jesuit tactic, where a Catholic captured and interrogated by the Protestant rulers of the time, because it was illegal to be Catholic, to not be a member of the Church of England in England or in Great Britain. So if they're captured, they might pervert the truth or speak ambiguously to avoid self-accusation, while still, trying to maintain a semblance of not lying exactly, This was particularly relevant at the time because the gunpowder plot that had threatened King James's life, which was put on by the Catholics, had occurred barely a year before this play was first performed. So anyway, the witches here are the primary equivocators, and think about how do they say things that are true that still confuse, that are true but not true, that sort of thing. All right, so the witches themselves. So we start the play off with lightning, and 3 witches enter. That's a pretty good opener, pretty darn good opener as far as plays go, right? And right off the bat, we've got our first rhyming couplet. When shall we 3 meet again, in lightning, thunder, lightning, or in rain? What did you think of the beginning of the play? How did it strike you when you got back past the character page and dug in and started reading? What do you think about it starting with them and not with Macbeth? What does it say about the mood of the play, the fate of the characters? The very first lines of something tend to be overly critiqued, and it's a first impression kind of thing, right? So how did this play strike you on its first impression when you began to read and it started with the witches? As always, think about how you'd stage something like this. How do you make those witches frightening to a modern audience? Because for King James and his contemporaries, the Weird Sisters they're not mere fantasies. They're things that people actually believed in at the time, including King James, as we talked about. And a man's decision to deal with forces of evil were, of course, matters of real concern. I'm just going to pause a few more notes on the screen. You guys are taking notes, which, of course, I always encourage. All right. Act 1. We're in Scene 3, but we're just going to quickly jump in Scene 2. We hear about these great battles, right? About how well Macbeth and Banquo did, how they were these fierce fighters. They're described in kind of gory terms about how Macbeth cleaved a man all the way up his entire body. And so far we've got 2 scenes of people talking about Macbeth before we ever see him. And we know that the king plans to name Macbeth the Thane of Cawdor after the traitor is executed. But we do finally see Macbeth, and he comes in with Banquo to stumble upon these witches that began the play. And Banquo is much more talkative, right? He has much more to say about them, to ask them, than Macbeth does. But they are mainly talking to Macbeth, and they tell him, Macbeth is Thane of Glamis. He will be Thane of Cawdor. Macbeth will be king. And then Banquo asks for his own fortune, to which they say, Banquo's children will be kings. What do you make of Macbeth right off the bat when you see him? How would you have him cast? What is his first reaction, his initial reaction to seeing these weird sisters, these witches? Is he immediately enthralled with the ideas of power? Is he hesitant? Macbeth is a very interesting character as both the villain and the protagonist of the story, right? And we get to see that transition. And we'll walk through it. We get to see that up close. So he hears from these weird sisters that he'll be the Thane of Cawdor and king, and the fellow Scottish noblemen enter and then confirm that Macbeth is to be named the Thane of Cawdor, which makes what the witches say already partially true. So they begin with a truth. You are Thane of Glamis. You will be Thane of Cawdor. You will be king. Two so far are true. What does that mean for the third one? And of course, that's what Macbeth and Banquo are thinking. And you can also see in this scene an example of the idea I put out about misfitting clothing. As Macbeth says, in reference to the title Thane of Cawdor, the Thane of Cawdor lives, why do you dress me in borrowed robes? Then he, moving back forward, he and Banquo step aside to talk about all they've heard, and Macbeth says, don't you think your kids will be kings now, since the witches had proved true about my newest title? And Banquo's like, yeah, and you may also you might be getting your hopes up for being king, but sometimes the instruments of darkness use truths to lead us to our own downfalls. And let me just go ahead and cut to the chase. Sorry to spoil it ahead of time, but this is basically the plot of the play. I guess you should have listened to your friend right from the get-go, Macbeth, because Banquo hits the nail on the head. Yeah, but maybe this is a bad idea to listen to these ladies. So when Banquo takes the other lords aside, we get Macbeth's first monologue, where we get to hear exactly what he's thinking. And Macbeth says, these omens cannot be evil because they spoke of accolades I've just won. But they cannot be good because they make my hair stand on end and they give me a terribly bad feeling. You should probably trust that feeling, buddy. Alright, so then Act 1, Scene 4. This is a very quick but important, ominous scene. First, it has a great line in it about the former Thane of Cawdor that kind of gets brushed by in most productions. Nothing in his life became him like the leaving of it. What a terrible thing, right? He died as one that had been studied in his death, to throw away the dearest thing he owed, as 'twere a careless trifle. Anyway, beautiful, and I think it makes you pause when you read it, or it always makes me contemplate. But more importantly, we see King Duncan, very proud, very laudatory of Macbeth and Banquo, and says, I can never express my gratitude to you enough. Just praises them both on and on. And then he says, our eldest, Malcolm, whom we named hereafter the Prince of Cumberland, etc., etc., etc. Basically, I've named my son Malcolm as my heir. And also, we're going to go celebrate all this great stuff at Inverness, at your castle, Macbeth. Inverness, obviously being Macbeth's home. There's a whole bunch all at once, a big blow all of a sudden. Hey, you're hosting a giant party, which is a huge honor, so you're welcome. Also, my son's going to be king. Let's go. But then, we see Macbeth has already kind of started getting his hopes up at this point. Remember he said, if chance will have me king, why chance may crown me. As in, if it's meant to be, maybe it'll just happen. Just like becoming Thane of Cawdor just happened. Well, now, obviously, with the announcement of Malcolm, it does not look like it's just going to happen. And then, of course, ooh again, double ooh, because Macbeth's thoughts are immediately sinister. He says, the Prince of Cumberland, that is a step on which I must fall down, or else o'erleap, for in my way it lies. Stars, hide your fires, let not light see my black and deep desires. So, he immediately, his very first thought, upon hearing this, he's like, oh my gosh, my gut reaction, don't let light be shone on it, don't let, the daylight see my first reaction to that news. So now we meet the other behemoth of a character in this play, and fun, crazy thing, we never learn her name, do we? Shame, shame, shame. But Lady Macbeth, kind of works well because she is worth comparing with and against her husband for sure. So let's do that. We see her reading this letter that Macbeth has written her about the witches and their predictions. And I think a line worth noting in shaping their relationship and viewing their relationship with each other is where Macbeth says in the letter, "This I have thought good to deliver thee, my dearest partner of greatness." They're partners in life, and that's a beautiful sentiment that will get twisted around and do them both in. Just wait. Anyway, she immediately has great ambition for him. She says she worries he won't have the guts to do it himself. Oh man, I already know my husband's gonna chicken out and not do what has to be done to earn the greatness promised to him. I'll have to persuade him. I'll have to be sure that he does. Then a messenger comes in and says, hey, the king is on his way here. You'll have to host him. Big giant dinner party. Are you ready? And she's like, why didn't I get this news sooner? And the messenger's like, don't blame me. We got here as fast as we could the second we heard it. So Lady Macbeth, very quickly realizing that this is their opportunity, her first reaction is to call on the supernatural world to fill her with cruelty, to prepare her for what's coming. It's a famous speech, and you saw references to those four humors again that we began with. She says, turn my nurturing milk of motherhood into gall, into yellow bile, that will make her angry and fierce. Erase her feminine traits, unsex me here, and give me the courage of a man. And this also has to do with the ideas of which of the four humors women tended to have more of, and which men tended to have more of. Men are more warlike, men are more violent, and so she's calling for that. Get rid of my nurturing tendencies and give me fire in my blood. And then Macbeth arrives, and his wife instantly leaps into action, right? She says, my worthy husband, we will seize on this moment, and Duncan shall never leave our house alive again. Be the welcoming host, and I'll do all that is needed to prepare for what must be done. And then quickly in scene 6, Duncan arrives, and Lady Macbeth welcomes all their guests. Also, this picture here is very famous portrayal of an actress who played Lady Macbeth. Look at that gown. It's fantastic. Rumor has it, the story goes, that that dress is made out of dragonfly wings, and it was seen to shimmer. Also, the image seems a little stretched on my screen here, so that's a bit of a bummer, but I think you still get the very ambitious, beautiful, formidable impact of Lady Macbeth here. Okay, so scene 7, we see Macbeth wavering, right? And Lady Macbeth has to come in and convince him. Macbeth is talking to himself, and he sees here and says, the king is here in a double trust. Number 1, I'm his kinsman and his subject, and that's my job to protect him and serve him. And number 2, I'm his host, who should offer him protection when he's underneath my roof. But then Lady M comes in, and he said, no, I will proceed no further in this business. And she's not having that at all. She's like, are you that fickle? Art thou afeard to be the same in thine own act and valor as thou art in desire? Are you so cowardly that you'll desire something, but you don't have the courage to match it? And Macbeth says, please, I dare do all that may become a man, and if I should do more, I wouldn't be one. To which she responds, "Then why did you even tell me about this? Why did you promise to do something you would not carry through with?" And then here comes maybe the worst image of the play, and the most lasting impact I think people have of Lady Macbeth, aside from later on. She says she's nursed children before, and she would pull her child from her breast and bash it to the ground if she had promised to do so, the way that her husband had promised to fulfill this. That's how strong her will is. More like that's how strong her crazy is, but that's one person's opinion. And it's also interesting, too, because we see nothing about Macbeth's children in this play, and that's a big fear throughout this whole story, right? Is this idea of having a successor, and they don't talk about Macbeth and Lady Macbeth having any children at all. Although we have seen that Lady Macbeth she's given evidence that she has had a kid before. So what happened to it? In the original source, she was a widow and married Macbeth and had a special needs child, but it's not necessarily it's definitely not spoken about here. Maybe alluded to a little bit. But I've seen productions, too, where it can be a big motivator, a big driver, or even a big schism between the two of them. This missing child. Anyway, it's interesting, and it's definitely subtext to the story. Anyway, so back on top of this, I would do this terrible, awful, horrible thing if I had promised that I would do it, like you've promised to do that. That's how strong my conviction is and my will I carry through with things. And he says, "But what if we fail?" And she says, "Fail? Screw your courage to the sticking place and will not fail." Which is a famous line, and now here it is, and you get to see it. And with that, of course, the plan is back on. Lady M is going to go get the king's chamber guards drunk until they pass out, and then they'll be able to take care of Duncan. And we'll blame it on the guards, and we'll cry and scream when we find his body. So we good with that plan? Awesome. Okay, break. I'm not good with that plan. That plan sounds terrifying. But, so now, sorry, my notes. So at the start of Act 2, we learn that Banquo has also been tempted by the witches, but only in his dreams, which is quite obviously not how Macbeth has been affected. He's certainly been affected a whole bunch more by them. But he pretends like he doesn't think of them. He's like, "What? No, I barely remember that." And you can kind of see the turn here, right? Where Macbeth no longer confides or speaks honestly with his comrade in this moment. Though he does say, we should speak at a later time. This is perhaps the third deferred conversation Macbeth has where he says specifically, we should talk later. Later. There will be time later, that idea. Maybe like things are moving too fast for Macbeth. Possibilities. But Banquo leaves, and Macbeth has his famous vision of a gory dagger in front of him, leading him the way to the king's chambers. "Is this a dagger I see before I messed it up already. Is this a dagger which I see before me, the handle towards my hand? Come, let me clutch thee." And the the embedded stage direction here tells us that he is in fact seeing something that isn't there. "Come, let me clutch thee." But as he's reached out and tried to grab it, he only to miss. And so he says, "I have thee not, yet I see thee still." And he goes on, "Art thou not, fatal vision, sensible to feeling and sight?" And this is a great use of the word fatal, because it means three things. We got triple meaning here. One, having to do with fate, with what the witches foretold, with what Macbeth has decided to do, to chase what he thinks is his destiny, Two, having to do with Duncan's death, fatal in the most common sense we know today. And then three, of course, having to do with Macbeth's own death later. In case you didn't know that that's how the play ends, I'm sorry to ruin it for you. You can kind of assume that that's how all tragedies go. Anyway, I shared a clip of Patrick Stewart doing this scene because I think it's a really good one to watch. And it's worth rewatching now, if you so desire, if you want to pause. because in this scene we really begin to see Macbeth starting. This is the cusp as he starts to unravel. He's hallucinating. That's not good. And it leads us into the banquet scene later. It portends the banquet scene, which is an even bigger, worse, crazy hallucination. So he follows this invisible bloody dagger towards Duncan's room, which has always been his destination. And then he hears the chimes, indicating that his wife has completed her role, and it's time for him to complete his. So Act 2, Scene 2, no turning back anymore, right? Lady Macbeth says that she's left everything set for her husband. Things are good to go. She also throws out her own first bit of guilt. She says, had he not resembled my father as he slept, I had done it. I would have no problem doing it. It's just he looked like my dad, and so I had a hard time. So thanks for taking care of it for me. Anyway, Macbeth comes in, and both of them seem very fraught, very frantic, high adrenaline, broken sentences, half-answered questions. They're both filled with anxiety and shame and fear, and Macbeth gets caught up in the fact that he couldn't utter the word amen. Lady Macbeth is like, don't think about that so much. And he's like, but wherefore could I not pronounce amen? I had most need of blessing, and amen stuck in my throat. Definitely an omen, right? Lady M still continues to steer his thoughts away from it, but he says, methought I heard a voice cry, sleep no more, Macbeth does murder sleep. The innocent sleep. Sleep that knits up the raveled sleeve of care. The death of each day's life. Sore labor's bath, balm of hurt minds, great nature's second course, chief nourisher in life's feast. These things, this is what sleep is. And he's murdered it. That sleep that he'll ever have again, he's killed it when he killed the king. And of course, it's a theme in this play, and we'll see it even in literature nowadays, and in movies and TV shows. The guilty cannot sleep. The first one that comes to mind is The Machinist. I don't know if you've seen that movie with Christian Bale, I think. Anyway, that's a major theme in that movie. Moving on. Anyway, so Lady Macbeth realizes that in his state, he's brought the daggers with him that he should have left with the guards, and she tells him to take them back, and he says he can't bear to think on what he's done. So she takes them back, and when she returns, she says that her hands are stained now, as red as his from the blood that was on the daggers, and tries to comfort him by saying, a little water clears us of this deed. But we'll see later, of course, that she finds it much harder to clean the blood off than she expects. So then, even with all of his wife's attempts at calming him down and comforting him, he still seems paralyzed by what he's done, and she urges him to go and change his clothes, and warns of the knocking that they can hear in the background. Somebody's knocking at the door, and Macbeth laments at the very end of the scene, twisting myself up. Wake, Duncan, with thy knocking, I wish thou couldst. Just ends this whole thing by, oh my gosh, I can't believe what I've done. I wish I could undo it. I wish that anything could wake Duncan up again. So, Act 2, Scene 4, Regicide is revealed to the rest of the current inhabitants of Inverness. The porter jokes as he goes to answer the door that he guards the gates of hell, and he lets Macduff and Lennox in, who have come to awaken the king. And Macbeth appears and greets them, and Macduff goes off stage to get the king. And what a terrible moment this is, because Macbeth knows what he's going to find, but he has to pretend like he doesn't, So Macduff returns to announce his murder. And Lady Macbeth's response to the news is, what, in our house? which you can choose. Is she doing a good job of covering it up here? How would you have her act? Because Macduff is like, it's a crime anywhere. It's awful that it happened, period. So Macduff then accuses the guards, and Macbeth's like, oh yeah, I got so angry that they did this that I killed them. And Macduff is like, wait, what? Why? And Macbeth gives this speech on it as though he's prepared it, perhaps. And Lady Macbeth faints at this moment. Everything happens really quickly. Perhaps, she feels Macbeth was ready to reveal too much and she tries to create a distraction, or maybe she's really distressed. Does she realize what they've done? This is a potent scene here. She screams and it's just, anyway, a lot is happening all at once. And Duncan's sons, worried, of course, that they are next, they flee, they run away. So, the next scene starts, obviously, with the account of very, very weird things happening. Creepy, crawly, unnatural things. A lot of times this scene can be cut from the production if you're trying to shorten it, but it demonstrates a few things, drives a few points home, perhaps. A falcon was seen killed by a mousing owl, a much smaller, less noble beast. Duncan's horses turned cannibalistic against each other, which is super gross and barely veiled comment on, of course, Duncan's noble subjects turning against one another. And then, just the idea of the natural world being upended. Things are not the way that they're supposed to be, and even nature is reflecting that. And then we find out that Duncan's sons, Malcolm and Donalbain, have been accused of bribing the guards that Macbeth framed for killing the king, and they fled. They definitely look guilty for fleeing, that's for sure. But we kind of understand it. We saw their little bit of conversation about why they left. But basically, this means that the crown falls on Macbeth's head. And now we see that the third thing that the witches foretold has come true. Macbeth is king. But at what cost, you guys? At what cost? Anyway, so Macduff says he will not leave. He will go to Fife, which is his castle. All right, Act 3, Scene 1. So here we see things go from bad to I guess not worse, but maybe just more bad, more badness happening. Banquo suspects Macbeth of killing the king, which totally I would too. Only Banquo, of course, knows about the prophecy of the witches, and he's probably thinking, oh wow, how crazy that happened now. That's nuts, yo. Actually, he's thinking, I fear thee plates most foully for it, but basically what I said first. Macbeth enters, and we see the two interact for the first time since Macbeth's coronation. What do you call your best friend when they become a king? We also see the new dynamic that a change in status creates, the difference between requests and demands. Macbeth wants Banquo at the feast, and Banquo says he'll do as the new king commands, and promises to return in time, which will be after dark. Macbeth, afraid of the witch's prophecy that Banquo's children will be heirs, not his own, decides to take advantage of this and arranges for his murder after dark. Such a good friend, Macbeth. There's a historical comic writer, Kate Beaton, who had this really great comic about this. Macbeth will be king, but Banquo's sons will be kings. And Macbeth's first thought is, oh man, I gotta kill Banquo. And Banquo's first thought is, oh man, our kids are gonna hook up. Like Macbeth was gonna have daughters. Like that's the other way that could have come true. But anyway. In this soliloquy that we get from Macbeth, he delves into ideas of fear, loathing, and sterility, of being sterile, of not being able to have children. And Banquo is to be feared because he's a better man than Macbeth. He got the same exposure to the witches, and it didn't affect him in the same way. at this point, Macbeth recalls about how Banquo admonished the witches when they said Macbeth would be king. He bitterly reflects on how they gave him what he calls now a fruitless crown, put a barren scepter in his grip. Uh-oh. Hang on one second. My battery's dying. Pause. Okay, we're good. We're back now. So, fruitless crown, barren scepter. He has all these fears, right? That, you know, no kids, no line, no future. And also that everything that he did is only going to benefit Banquo's children, which he says he doesn't want come to pass. Come to pass, which is a really bitter thing, isn't it? Anyway, we see here that Macbeth has abandoned all ideas of Banquo as a confidant in any ways, you know. Think about that, we'll talk later. That has certainly not happened. Banquo has now become an enemy to Macbeth. There'll be no more shared discussions of the prophecy, no more brotherly comrades in arms. And so then, you know, with this plot, we've got a question on our hands, which is worse, killing your king or killing your friend? What do each of these decisions, you know, what do they say about what Macbeth is becoming? What sort of thing he is slowly sinking into? Anyway, two murderers then enter. Think about doubling, about what other parts could be doubled with this. Who plays these murderers? Because in a theater troupe of only so many people, you're not going to have only one person play one role that happens in two scenes, you know. So you're going to double these actors up that aren't going to be busy around this. So who plays them? King Duncan, you know, the actor who played King Duncan could be one of them. Or it could be the two guards who were blamed for killing the king. That would be poetic. That'd be fantastic, right? Anyway, Macbeth then convinces these men, these murderers, manipulates them into thinking Banquo is the enemy and that they should kill him. And he says he can't do it himself because Banquo is too popular. He's too well-liked in Macbeth's own circles. He also adds, don't forget to kill his son, Fleance. And this is the crux, right? Fleance has to die to thwart the witch's prophecy. So he sends them off to do this. Act 3, Scene 2, we see more of Macbeth wanting to be alone, withdrawing from Banquo, withdrawing from his wife. She has to tell a servant, say to the king I would attend his leisure. Like, please let the king know that when he's available, I'd like to see him. Which is completely different than the letter he wrote saying that she was his dearest partner in greatness, right? Now she has to ask for an audience. She says to him, why do you keep alone, husband? Stop thinking about things that are done. Macbeth then says that he has terrible dreams. He's afraid to eat. He's restless. All of the things he feared after killing the king have manifested. And she tells him to put on a happy face, to trick, to you know, keep their guests tonight from at the feast from being suspicious. He says that he will, and then he lies to her. He tells her to pay attention to Banquo tonight. But we already know that Banquo will be dead before dinner, right? He tells her something terrible will happen. And we also see him cast a bit of a spell when he says, ere the bat hath flown his cloistered flight, ere to Hecate summons the shard-born beetle with his drowsy hums that rung the night's yawning peal, there shall be done a deed of dreadful note. And she asks what's to be done. But he won't tell her. So now Macbeth is withdrawn from the two people we've seen him confide in, and he sounds like the witches, right? Eye of toad and eye of Newton, tongue of dog, you know, like he's conjuring. At this point, is there any trust between Lady Macbeth and Macbeth at this point? How would you have it portrayed? What are they doing? How are they? What is their chemistry at this point? How close or how far apart are they sitting? How much are they looking at each other, paying attention, that sort of thing? You can really paint a lot of subtext in how you say these things and how you interact on stage. Act 3, Scene 3, the mystery of the three murderers. So there were definitely only two dudes who came in before, and now a third man has joined the two murderers that we saw Macbeth talking to. So who is this third man, you know? Some people think it's an editing mistake. Some people think they just cut it entirely and they keep it at two. Some people make that third person the king, like we talked about in doubling, in a new role, or perhaps all three actors are the actors who played the witches. You know, maybe it was just Macbeth's paranoia. Maybe there's a missing scene. You know, he added a third murderer because he was afraid it wouldn't get done. A lot of options, a lot of different ways to address it that can add to the play. Anyway, the most important part here is that it is too dark. The murderers mess up and Fleance escapes. A murderer cries, "Who did strike out the light?" Was this chance? Was this fate? What if you said it to be the third murderer, huh? What if the third murderer accidentally kicked over the lamp? And what are the implications based on which actors double for this role? I have so much fun thinking about all the different options here. And poor Banquo, being slain, tells his son, "Fly, good Fleance, fly, fly, fly." So then we have the banquet. Ooh, it's kind of hard to get that last word in. It says sorrowful. There. So the beginning of this party has one of those murderers arriving to tell Macbeth that the deed is half done. His friend Banquo is dead, and it's discussed in terribly bloody terms. He reports that he slit his throat and that Banquo now lies in a ditch with 20 trenched gashes to his head. Just in case us seeing it wasn't enough, now we have to hear it described, right? We didn't get to see Macbeth kill Duncan, but we do get to see Banquo die. And then we hear about it on top of that. So, the bloodbath is certainly starting to ramp up, right? Although I will say, just like how you can add in the scene with Margaret and being unfaithful in Much Ado About Nothing, talking to a gentleman at her window that we don't see but we hear about. You can add that in. A lot of performances, including Michael Fassbender's movie that all of my scene clips are from because it's very cinematic. That includes a scene of him killing the king, certainly. So you can add that, or choose to keep it off stage, build suspense. Options. Anyway, Macbeth tells the murderer to come back tomorrow, and he sends him off. So many delayed conversations. And then Lady M comes in and tells her husband, "Come on, bud, come attend your dinner guests. It's time to get your head in the game, man." And we get this great stage direction here. Enter the ghost of Banquo, and sits in Macbeth's place at the table. So, how do you stage this? Does Banquo enter? How does he act? How does he look? Is he covered in blood, like they've just described him? Is this bloody, bloody man? How does Macbeth respond? There are, again, great options for this. Things to think about as you read, how you would stage it. But anyway, then Macbeth, as if, just asking for trouble, says, "Oh, if only Banquo were here. It's such a bummer. He's just, he couldn't make it." Obviously, he's not noticed him at this point. But Lennox then bids the king to sit, and Macbeth is like, yeah, but the table's full. Lennox is like, no, dude, right here. And he points to the seat with Banquo in it, which has all sorts of, underlying implications. Banquo's ghost sitting in the king's seat, And then we see Macbeth has a public breakdown. He starts yelling, "Thou canst not say I did it! Never shake thy gory locks at me!" And Ross is like, we should go. And Lady Macbeth's like, "Oh no, please stay. It's just a little fit. He's always been like this. If you point it out, it'll get worse. Just ignore it. Please, Sid. It'll pass." And she pulls her husband together and is like, "Are you a man? Like, get it together. Man up." And he's like, "Yeah, I am a man. I am a bold one that dare look on okay, let me try again. I got excited. Yeah, I am a man, and a bold one that dare look on that which might appall the devil. To which she's like, this is just another dagger of the mind. Referencing back to his first hallucination, when he first started going crazy. But Macbeth does not heed her, and he tries to talk to the ghost, who says nothing and just leaves. Does he vanish? Does he walk away? You know? Options. Great ways for those actors to play off of each other, you know. Lady Macbeth does get Macbeth to sit after this, but then the ghost reappears, and Macbeth, perhaps unknowingly, perhaps he still doesn't see the ghost again. It's like he's asking for trouble, right? He toasts to Banquo, you know. But then Macbeth loses it when he re-sees the ghost, and Lady M can't cover for him anymore, and it's you know. Anyway, I encourage you to go and rewatch this scene. It's very climactic. Okay, so we're gonna quick wrap it up for today. I know this is kind of a long lecture. That's okay. It's a good one, right? Anyway, if you have any fun ideas, any fun thoughts, anything to share, or questions, of course, email me at any point in time. And with that, I'll call it a day and quit watching.